Okay, so again, if you have not downloaded the assets from Canvas, make sure you do that because we will be using those assets in this part. The assets can be found in Canvas in modules, week of January 5th. Look for the platformer assignment, download that zip file, extract it, make sure you put it in your assets folder, in your GameMaker folder, on your OneDrive, and you'll be all set. So again, when we did part one, we used placeholders for our player and our enemy and our wall objects. And that's a very common practice. Again, typically the programmer is not also the artist. So the programmer would give details to their artist saying, this is the size I want the sprite to be. This is kind of what I would like it to look like. And then the artist would make those sketches while the programmer is working. Once the programmer gets the art from their artist, then they'll put it in their game. And that's what we're going to do today. So let's open our player sprite. And instead of using this solid cube, we're going to change that to the image that's in the asset. So we're going to click on import, and I'm going to go up one to GameMaker and then into my assets folder, into my platformer assets folder, and I'm looking for player, just player. There's only one image in this, so I can just go ahead and import it directly. Notice that the size did adjust, although we were using 32 by 32. Our player is actually 48 by 48, which is fine. And we were able to use import, again, because it was a single frame. So here's my player. He's facing to the right, and there is no animation. We are going to adjust the collision mask. So we're going to expand collision mask. We're going to change it to manual. And it is smaller than our whole sprite frame, but I actually want it smaller than that. So we're going to pull that collision down so that it is the width of his body and not quite his full height. So like maybe to about the middle of his face there. A smaller hitbox is typically better because you don't want your player to look like he's collided with something before he gets there. So we actually want him to get to a point before we get this collision event going on. So that's why we're changing the hitbox on that. Okay. So that's enough of player. I'm going to go ahead and close that so I don't mess around with it. Then I'm going to create a new sprite called player R. And this is going to be used when our player is running. So we're going to right click on sprites and create a new sprite. And we're going to call this player R, capital R, player R for player running. This is our running sprite. Now this is going to be an animated sprite. And before we used edit image, and from here we went to image and we imported a strip image. That was because of the way our sprite sheet was set up. This time we're going to go ahead and import. So I'm going to click import, and I'm looking for player R. Notice that player R has 4 images, and at the end of this file name, it says _strip4. _strip4 is recognized by GameMaker as meaning divide this into 4 even panels. So when I import it, there's my 1 panel, and we could go ahead and run it, and you can see what it's going to look like when he runs. It kind of bounces up and down a little bit. Doesn't have any arms. It's a little funny looking, but that's okay. If we opened it for edit, you would see all 4 of those frames. But this way, we don't have to go into edit image. We can just go ahead and import it. But again, that only works because the end of the file name said strip 4. And notice that we do have middle center because we set that as default. And it's the center of this sprite, which is 24 by 24, not the center of our 32 by 32. We're not going to mess with the collision mask. Honestly, I wouldn't even care what the collision mask was. If it was just this top little corner up here, I wouldn't care because we're going to deal with that a different way. So we have our player, we have our player R. We're also going to do a player A. So create a new sprite, player A, capital A there, import, and here is my player A strip. Now that's just 2. Now if I run this animation, he looks really strange, but although this sprite does have 2 frames, we're not actually going to run it as an animated sprite. So when he's going up, his feet are going to be together and his eyes are up. He's looking up. And when he's coming down, his feet are farther apart. He's ready to catch himself as he falls, and his eyes have moved down a little bit. So you can see that in the animation. Okay, and his mouth has moved down a little bit. So in the first frame, he's looking up. In the second frame, he's looking down. In the first frame, his feet are together. In the second frame, he's bracing himself for a fall. And that's our player A. Again, middle center. Now we're going to move back to our player object. And our player object has started out with just that regular player. And remember, we changed the collision mask for player, but we did not change the collision mask for the other 2 sprites. We don't need to. Right here under collision mask, we're going to click, and instead of leaving it as same as sprite, we're going to set it to player. Now, when we change our sprite to player R, and we're running, our collision mask will still be the one that we have on player. And when we change our player sprite to player A, because we're in the air, our collision mask will still be the one that's on player. So we only needed to set that collision mask in one place, which also means if we're not happy with it, we only need to adjust it in one place. So let's go back to our step event. And let's look at this code. I'm going to make this bigger so we can see it a little better. Make sure that your code is in this order. So we have our variables for left, right, and jump. We're calculating our movement, both horizontal and vertical. We're checking to see if we can jump when we hold that space key. And if we can, we're changing our vertical speed. We're looking for a horizontal collision for when we're moving left and right. We're looking for a vertical collision before we move up or down. And that was all the code from our previous video. Okay, so at the bottom of this step event, we are going to add some code to decide which sprite to use. We're going to write if an exclamation point, remember that means not, place meeting. We're looking just below us, 1 pixel. for a wall. So this is looking 1 pixel below us for a wall. And if we don't find a wall, if there is no wall there, that means that we are in the air. Okay, now again, make sure you have the right number of closed parentheses. You need 2 because we've got 2 open there. So if there's not a wall beneath me, that means I am in the air. So I am going to change my sprite index. You should begin to remember that when we want to change a sprite, we're using sprite index. I'm going to change it to player A. I want to stop my animation because although this sprite has 2 frames, it's not really an animated sprite. So I don't want any animation, and that is my image speed. I'll set that equal to 0. That's what stops the animation. And then remember, we have 2 images to choose from. So we need to decide whether we're going up or we're going down. So that's an if. We're going to ask this question. We're going to look at up or down based on our v-speed. If our v-speed is greater than 0, that means we are moving down. Greater than 0, adding to y, moving down. So we want the second frame of the sprite. Now, remember that the frames are image index, and they start counting at 0. So the second frame is actually frame 1. Else, we are moving up, so we want the first frame. So we'll set our image index equal to 0, because our first frame is index 0 and our second frame is index 1. Adding to y will move us down. Otherwise, our v-speed is either 0 or less than 0, meaning we're going up. So we're going to have that first frame. Player A, no animation, choose our frame. Else, remember that the if means we're in the air. Else, well, else means we've landed on the floor or on a platform or on the ground, however you want to look at that. But we have landed. So if we're landed, then we want to make sure that our image speed gets set back to 1 because we want to restart our animation. And now we need to decide which sprite to use. So if our HSP is equal 0, HSP equal 0, that means we are standing still. Then our sprite index will be player. Else, our sprite index will be player R, because we are running or walking, depending on how you want to look at it. If we're on the floor and our horizontal speed is 0, we're standing still, so we're just player. But if we're on the floor and our horizontal speed is not 0, we're running, so our index is player R. Okay, so let's run this and see if all of that works. So let's check jumping first. So I hit my space bar, legs go together, on the way down, they're back apart. Okay, so that seems to be working. Running, oh, running right looks good. Running left, not so much. Jump up here. Oh, that's probably not a great design either. Okay, so let's fix that first. I'm going to go into my level, and I'm going to choose that. Oops, got to be on walls. I'm going to choose that wall. I'm going to get rid of it. Any place else am I going to run into problems when I'm trying to jump? I don't think so. So that fixes that. Okay, so all of this is working really well. The only issue is right here where we're running. And if we're running to the left, we need our player to face that way. And if we're running to the right, we need our player to face that way. There's something really cool that we're going to use here. We're going to go outside of this else all the way down at the bottom of our code, and we're going to add another if statement. And we're going to look at our HSP. If it is not equal to 0, if HSP is not equal to 0, then we are going to set our image X scale. Remember, we used image X scale in platform to shrink that paddle image so that we could draw smaller paddles for our lives. We're going to use X scale this time to flip our image. So instead of setting image X scale to a decimal and make it shrink, we're going to set it to be the same sign as our HSP. So when our HSP is negative, we're going to set it to -1. And when our HSP is positive, we're going to set it to +1. But we're going to do that using a special function called sign. And inside the parameter list, we're going to put HSP. Now, sign is a function. I know it's a function because it has a parameter list. Sign is a function that returns +1 or -1. Always +1 or -1. Doesn't matter what this number is. All we're looking for is the sign, and we're returning the sign of that number. So when this is a positive number, the sign is +1. When this is a negative number, the sign is -1. Our X scale equal to +1 just gives us our regular sprite picture. Our X scale equal to -1 flips that image on the vertical axis, making it point the opposite direction. So if we're not standing still, if our HSP is not 0, meaning we're moving, we're going to look at the direction we're moving in, and that's the direction we're going to make our sprite face. Real simple, real clean, real easy code. Let's run it and just make sure it works. Running to the right, running to the left, running to the right, running to the left. Notice when I stop, I'm still facing left because I haven't ever changed it. Running to the right, when I stop, I'm still facing right. So this works whether I'm jumping or running or whatever. I like it. Now, remember that we don't really need all of these curly braces. But again, if you want to leave them, that's fine. If you like your code to be a little cleaner, like I do, you can go ahead and remove those. However, if you remove the curly braces, make sure that the body, the code, is indented. Your code should still be indented. Don't bring your code back even with that if statement. So the if and else should line up, and those statements should also line up. You cannot remove this set of curly braces because there's more than one statement inside of there. I could remove this one, and I could remove this one. And right here, I could actually remove this. And I could remove that. And I believe that's all of my curly braces. So I could shrink my code up considerably by removing some of those extra curly braces. They don't hurt anything, so if you want to leave them in, that's fine. The one thing that you might run into if you're wanting to put in sound and you wanted to put in a specific sound when he jumps, so you wanted a different sound when he was going up than you had when he was going down, so you're going to add your sound in here. If you're going to add something to this, you're going to add another line of code, you have to have curly braces. So if you want to just leave all the curly braces in, that's fine. If you want to pull them out, that's fine too. I don't really care. But at this point, we are done with part 2, and you do need to get your game checked for your part 2 grade. So once your game is running well, it's using your player sprite instead of the simple box. You're getting your animation when you jump up and down. You're getting your animation to change when you move left and right. Everything is working. You're able to move all around. Your game is designed, your levels are designed well enough that you're able to navigate them. Then let me know so that I can come and give you your part 2 grade.